Law enforcement has seen a lot of weird stuff, especially in homicide and criminal cases. But there are times when nobody can even comprehend what their eyes are seeing. Some true crime stories are stranger than fiction, and today's cases, well, they're exactly that. Like how Jennifer Cave was reported missing when she failed to come home after a night out, and later her body was discovered by her own parents. Or how a spy with a knack for fitness was found lifeless in a gym bag in his unusually hot apartment. Or how a teenager was found unresponsive and cold in her own school's bathroom stall. These are just some of the weird cases that left everyone utterly baffled. On the morning of August 18, 2005, a man and woman named Jim and Sharon Sedgwick arrived at the Orange Tree condominiums in Austin, Texas. They were looking for Jennifer Cave, Sharon's daughter. They tried knocking on her door for a few minutes, and when they got no answer, they decided to take matters into their own hands, and they walked in anyway. The apartment was a mess, to say the least. Things were strewn all over the floors, drawers were pulled out, and it looked like a dump. But Jim and Sharon continued their search. As they reached the bathroom and Jim pushed the door open, what he saw likely traumatized him for the rest of his life. In the bathtub was the body of a woman, but not just any woman. This was Jim's stepdaughter, Sharon's biological daughter. She'd been on a night out with friends of hers on August 16th, but sadly, she didn't come back home. Instead, here she was, lifeless in a bathtub. It doesn't get any scarier or more tragic than this. Jennifer Ray Cave was born and raised in Texas, and she had a pretty comfortable life and belonged to a huge family. She was one of 5 girls in the Cave family. Jennifer was super smart growing up. She excelled in school, extracurricular activities, you name it. She was sort of a jack of all trades, good at everything. When Jennifer was still young, her parents, Sharon and Charles, got divorced, and her mom went on to date and marry another guy named Jim Sedgwick. Even though Jennifer's family wasn't the same anymore, Jim loved Jennifer, and all of Sharon's kids the same. Jennifer was also quite fond of Jim, and the two had a great relationship. Jennifer attended Mary Carroll High School in Corpus Christi, and she graduated in 2002. Later, she enrolled in Texas State University and took up finance as her major. She loved the subject, but school not so much, so after a semester, she dropped out, and she worked at a restaurant in Austin, Texas, and then enrolled in Austin Community College and took classes there. So Jennifer was your typical college student. She studied, worked part-time, and was also not above having some fun at parties. And with that said, Jennifer was very responsible. But fast forward to 2005, Jennifer was done with her finance courses, and right before the tragedy that struck the Cave family, Jennifer was offered a position as a legal assistant at a local law firm in Austin, Texas, and she couldn't be happier. She was finally living her dream. She called up her parents and friends and told them about her new job and how she was due to start on August 17th of 2005. One of the people who got to know about the good news was a fellow university student and friend, and his name was Colton Aaron Petoniak. Colton was also studying finance at the University of Texas, and ever since he was a kid, he was a straight-A student, which was the main reason why he got a scholarship to study at the University of Texas. But as soon as he stepped foot into college, he transformed into a completely different person, and that person was not a genius anymore. He became addicted to substances, and he abused them badly. This caused him to become somewhat of an outlaw, for lack of a better term. He was convicted of having illegal substances and sleeping pills in his possession, and he also entered a rehabilitation program to get clean, but obviously that didn't work. He was given a total of just 20 days in prison for this felony. But he also had a girlfriend at the time, and her name was Laura. She was also a student of the University of Texas, but the two had broken up sometime before Jennifer's murder. But anyway, Jennifer and Colton, they were close friends. I'm assuming they hit it off at one of these parties that they both attended. But one thing I want to point out is that Jennifer and Colton were not in a relationship, nor did they have feelings for each other. Colton had a girlfriend at the time that he met Jennifer, and Jennifer also had someone in her life. They were just good friends who frequently met for a good time, and that's exactly what happened before August 17th. But no one could have guessed that this otherwise great night out would end in murder. Jennifer was jumping off the walls the night before her first job. She was looking forward to the day, and on the evening of August 16th, she was getting ready for bed and she got a call from none other than Colton. Actually, Colton had heard about Jennifer getting the job that she wanted, so he decided to congratulate her and invite her out for a round of drinks. Even though Jennifer really didn't want to because she didn't want to show up hungover for her first day of work, she thought that catching up with a friend would be nice. It had been a while since she and Colton had hung out, since Jennifer was busy with job hunting and things like that, so it was a date, a friendly one. The duo met up in downtown Austin at a bar called 6th Street, and they ordered some drinks and chatted. But Colton was downing one drink after the other, and he was completely drunk in no time. A night out with a friend turned into a nightmare because clearly Colton had no control over how much he could drink, and the two sat at the restaurant for hours before Jennifer finally had enough. She basically pulled Colton out of his seat and helped him all the way back to his apartment. I just know that Jennifer was wishing she hadn't said yes to this night out with Colton the whole time. The situation was a mess. The man who'd invited her out was now nothing more than a drunken pile of human, and it was nearing midnight. Jennifer had to be up early the next morning, and now she was stuck with the responsibility of taking Colton back home. I mean, props to Jennifer because Colton deserved to be left on the side of the street for doing this to her, but Jennifer took Colton back to the Orange Tree condominiums where he lived, and if that name sounds familiar, that's because it was the exact place where Jennifer's body would soon be found. This case escalated in one of the most rapid ways I've ever seen. Usually, when situations like this happen, there's a bit of a lead up, or some sort of inkling that things are about to go wrong. But not this time. Upon arriving at the condo, Jennifer entered, dragging Colton across the threshold and into his home. As Jennifer stepped into the apartment that day, she only intended on helping out her friend, who was clearly struggling. But she had no idea that this very apartment, on this very night, would be where she would lose her life. Now, we really don't know what happened in that apartment, but based on the evidence found by paramedics and the police, at some point, a firearm was used to murder Jennifer. Colton somehow pulled out a firearm and aimed it at his friend's arm, and the shot pierced through Jennifer's chest, ending her life instantly. But Colton seemingly wasn't done yet. He went straight to a local store in this state of drunkenness, and he bought a hacksaw, trash bags, an air freshener, and other supplies to help get rid of evidence. Again, there was no lead up to this, no indication that anything was going wrong. Colton was blackout drunk one minute, then up and moving around the next, trying to claim the life of one of his closest friends. It was an escalation unlike anything the detectives had ever seen, completely unprovoked. But what makes this case so bizarre on top of this is that Colton claims he has no memory of this taking place. But let's be real. It's funny how he doesn't remember murdering one of his best friends, but he does remember to buy all of the supplies so that his apartment is clean after the fact, and that all of the evidence is then erased. I'm not necessarily buying his explanation. Well, once he was back at the apartment, he drugged Jennifer to the bathtub and did what he felt he had to do, leaving her body to be then discovered by her own parents. But how do we know this? And what could have possibly in any universe have taken place to lead to such a horrific murder, completely out of left field like this? Well, on the morning of August 17th, Jennifer didn't show up for her first day of work. So her workplace called Jennifer's mom, Sharon, and inquired about it. Sharon was honestly floored when she heard of Jennifer's absence. Jennifer was so excited for this job, she couldn't have just skipped her first day of work, right? Well, Sharon decided to do the next most obvious thing, to call Jennifer. And sure enough, she wasn't picking up her phone. She wasn't answering her texts, and Sharon was slowly starting to lose her mind because of the panic. She then tried calling some of Jennifer's friends, and one of them informed Sharon that she'd been out for dinner and drinks with a guy named Colton. So when Sharon got a hold of Colton's number, she called him. And what Colton said will truly infuriate you to no end. He said that he doesn't know where Jennifer is, and that Sharon should just leave him alone. The audacity of this man. A mom is looking for her presumably missing daughter, and you just tell her to leave you alone? Well, during this time, Jim also teamed up with Sharon, and now that they knew that Jennifer was with Colton, they decided to report their 21-year-old daughter missing, and they went straight to Colton's apartment. See, Jim and Sharon weren't going to wait around for the police because at this point, it had been a whole day and the police were doing nothing to find Jennifer. The cops also told Jim and Sharon that they needed to wait for a search warrant for Colton's apartment to enter. But all of this fell on deaf ears, and Jim and Sharon broke a window into Colton's apartment, and they gained access anyway. Not the best thing to do, but in their defense, they'd waited for too long. I can't say I wouldn't do the exact same thing. But that was when Jim came across the grisly discovery of his stepdaughter's body. I mean, it's one thing for a stranger to discover something like this, but for a family member to see with their own eyes, that's just a different level of traumatizing. This was their child. Jim and Sharon immediately fled the house and called the emergency services and the police. Jennifer was killed by her friend, but the police didn't know that yet. So they checked Colton's phone records, since he was the last person to see Jennifer alive, and that was when they found out that he was all the way in Mexico having the time of his life with Laura, his now ex-girlfriend. The two had broken up a while back, before Jennifer's attack. The reason was Laura's apparent obsession with Colton. She couldn't leave him alone, but now it seemed to the police that Laura might be in on the murder of Jennifer. So they teamed up with the Mexican police and SWAT teams, and a manhunt ensued. The police were able to find out that Laura and Colton had escaped in Laura's green Cadillac, which was seen on surveillance footage near the Mexican border. The couple stayed in Mexico for 5 days before they were finally tracked down and taken back to the US. Colton was eventually charged with the murder of Jennifer Cave on August 23rd, whereas Laura was free to go, even though the police suspected her of being an accomplice. Now, you might be wondering, why? Well, it was revealed during Laura's interrogation that she'd visited Colton right after he'd murdered Jennifer. Laura claimed that once she arrived at the apartment, Colton proceeded to tell her that there was, quote, a body in his bathtub. Laura was apparently in disbelief, but Colton convinced her to come and take a look for herself, which she did. I just don't understand why she didn't call the police right then and there. It would have saved the police so much time. Regardless, Colton then told Laura to get out of the apartment, and the next day he pretty much threatened her at knife point to drive both of them to Mexico so that they wouldn't get caught. But remember, Laura hadn't even done anything wrong. She wasn't involved in the slightest. Now, legally speaking, I don't know what this would be classified as, but in my book, this essentially qualifies as kidnapping. So in essence, Colton had just murdered his best friend and then taken his ex-girlfriend hostage on a trip to Mexico. This man knows no bounds, but the police were finally about to get to the bottom of all of this. Now it was time for Colton to be questioned, but he claimed he didn't remember murdering Jennifer. He said that Jennifer was helping him get up to his apartment, but then he conveniently blacked out, and when he came to, he saw Jennifer lifeless in the bathtub. Colton then tried to pin the crime on Laura, and went on a spiel about how he would never hurt Jennifer if it weren't for the alcohol-induced haze that he was in. Thankfully, no one bought Colton's story. The crime was so brutal, so unnerving, that it really left no doubt in anyone's mind that Colton didn't want Jennifer to come out alive. Prosecutor Bill Bishop said in a statement, quote, "It was the post-murder behavior that made it so grotesque. The mutilation was angry. There wasn't any effort to hide the body or get rid of the body. He was just playing with it like a toy." I think he summarized Colton's behavior perfectly. He dehumanized Jennifer and left her in the bathtub only to be discovered by her parents. If that isn't cruel and tragic, I don't know what is. In the end, on January 29th of 2007, Colton was sentenced to 55 years in prison. But get this, he'll be eligible for parole once he's completed 50% of that sentence. That's only a little over 20 years for murdering someone that he called his friend. Where's the justice in that? Colton will most likely be out of prison in his 50s. And as far as Laura, she was convicted of tampering with evidence and hindering the apprehension of Colton, for which she got 5 years and 1 year, respectively. But she was to serve these sentences concurrently. But in 2010, the jury re-sentenced Laura to the maximum possible sentence, as well as fined her $14,000. So now she'll have to pay fines and get 11 years in prison with 2 years credit for being in confinement already. Now, if you're like me, this may sound like a lot. After all, Laura supposedly wasn't really involved in Jennifer's murder, and she was essentially forced to take Colton to Mexico out of fear for her own life. But it wouldn't be quite that simple. See, Laura had actually boasted about her involvement in the crime to a friend afterward, where she allegedly told this friend that she was fleeing to Mexico as part of her idea, and that she specifically described herself as the mastermind. This directly contradicts Laura's earlier statements and proves that while she may or may not have been involved with the actual murder, she certainly played an active role in the aftermath. Colton Botaniak is currently incarcerated in the Memorial Unit of Rocher in Texas, and Laura was imprisoned in the Lockhart Unit until her release on parole in March of 2018, with the conditions of wearing a GPS monitor, showing up for mandatory checks and monitoring, and having no contact with the Kay family. Even though we know who killed Jennifer, and he's currently serving his sentence, what haunts everyone to this day is why? Why did Colton kill Jennifer? What was the motive? Did something happen that night that drove Colton to the edge and he saw no choice but to kill his friend? Was there some other reason? Was Colton jealous of Jennifer? Was it rejection and resentment that fueled Colton's attack? We may never really know, because the only one who knows what went down that night is Jennifer herself, and now she's gone forever. Colton to this day claims to have no memory of the crime. Thus, he isn't willing to reveal his motive because he claims he doesn't know. But Jennifer's dreams, her aspirations, her future, everything was put on a permanent hold that fateful night, and no one knows why. Amanda Wienckowski, affectionately known as Manda, was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. Amanda attended Niagara Wheatfield High School in 2006, and according to her mom Leslie, she was also crowned Miss Teen Buffalo at one point. During high school, Amanda also participated in dancing, swimming, and acrobatics. You name it. She had all of her eggs in different baskets, and things were going pretty good. Amanda had dreams of becoming a police officer. She wanted to change the world. She was bright, beautiful, and a strong young lady. So at around that same time, Amanda also got her diploma from the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, or BOCES, to become a police officer. She was a step closer to making her dream come true. But sadly, that's where all of her plans changed. You know what they say, you are the company you keep. Well, according to her mom, Amanda met some questionable people at the time that she was working to get her BOCES diploma. And sadly, that was when she fell into the dark void of addiction. It was like Amanda was sucked into this deep black hole and she couldn't get out. One time she told her mom that it was as if the devil was after her, which is heartbreaking to hear, but a great analogy. It's like running from someone you can't see, and with every step you think you're getting ahead, but you can still feel them breathing down your neck, heavier and heavier. To see Amanda going from being an ambitious 18-year-old girl with amazing dreams to now getting trapped in the web of substance abuse, it's devastating. But Amanda was a fighter. She tried her best to let go of her addiction, and Leslie even took her to a clinic to get clean. Money was tight, but Leslie was there for her daughter every step of the way. But the ride was bumpy, as it usually is. Amanda didn't want to be an addict. She tried so many different times to break the habit, but things just weren't working out. There came a point when Amanda had to resort to adult work to pay for her addiction. She would engage in physical relations with people, and they would pay her with substances. And it was a very vicious cycle. Amanda knew she couldn't keep doing this, but she also felt like her body would turn inside out if she didn't keep feeding the demon. Amanda was in touch with all sorts of shady people, so she had a manager at the time too, and his name was Adam Patterson. And according to some sources, when you look at the two side by side, Adam's old enough to be Amanda's dad, but he wasn't. He was Amanda's manager. Oh, and Amanda also lived with said manager on the Tuscarora Reservation in Lewiston. Basically, Adam knew all the people who could help Amanda out. They had what Amanda wanted and vice versa. So Amanda would set up meetings between the two, and he would drive her to these people's houses where the deals would be done. You can read in between the lines. So this was Amanda's life before her untimely passing. And this was exactly what she was doing on the fateful day that she went missing. At the time of her disappearance, aside from trying to win this tug of war involving addiction and adult work, Amanda worked at a bar called Cocktail Bob's, and she was enrolled in Niagara County Community College, where she was taking criminal justice courses. On the fateful day of December 5th, 2008, Amanda was working her shift at the bar when she got a call from her roommate and manager, Adam. He'd just gotten off the phone with the guy named Justice, who was Amanda's next client. Now, I don't know if Amanda knew it at the time, but this Justice dude was very bad news. He was a very violent man, and he was known to be a scary giant. He was only 22 at the time, and he was built like a tank, and it didn't help that he had a shady criminal history. Also, his name wasn't actually Justice. His name was actually Antoine Garner. And according to the deal with Adam, Amanda had to come to Antoine's home for the trade, which was located on Buffalo East Side. So Amanda got a friend of hers at work to cover her shift, and she got into Adam's car and the two drove off. When they reached Antoine's house, Amanda hopped out, and according to Adam, he stayed outside in the car. Now, I want to make it clear that from this point on, this is Adam's version of events, so take it as you will. But he said that after waiting for about an hour, Amanda still hadn't come out, but he got a call from her. Apparently, Amanda told him that she was going to take a while and that he shouldn't wait for her. So Adam did exactly that. He started his car, drove away from Antoine's home, and thought that Amanda would make it back home on her own. But that didn't happen. Amanda wouldn't make it back home, and she wouldn't answer her mom's calls either. See, Amanda and Leslie regularly talked on the phone, and when Leslie called Amanda the next day and didn't get an answer from her, she was obviously very worried. This was unlike Amanda. Even if Amanda was somewhere out on a bender, she would call her mom back, but it had been almost 2 days, and Leslie was done giving Amanda any more time to reach out. Without hesitation, she called the police on December 7th and reported her 20-year-old daughter missing. It had been 2 days since Amanda had failed to return home or answer her phone, and the police wanted to talk to who they thought was the last person who saw Amanda, Adam Patterson. When Adam was eventually questioned by the police, he told them the same thing I just told you. He took Amanda to Antoine's house for the trade-off, and Amanda told Adam herself that she'd be late, and so he drove away. When the police asked what Adam did after driving away from Antoine's house, he told the police that he went home at around 8:30 p.m., and after that, he didn't know where Amanda was. So the police had to backtrack a bit because Adam wasn't the last person to see Amanda alive. It was none other than Antoine Garner. So the police knew where to go for answers, and they found themselves at the front door of Antoine's house, which was in a very sketchy part of town. When Antoine was questioned, he had something entirely different to tell the police. Antoine claimed that Adam and Amanda did come to his house, but that Amanda didn't stay longer than 10 to 15 minutes, and that she was then out the door with Adam. When asked if Amanda and Antoine engaged in physical relations, Antoine denied doing anything of the sort with Amanda. According to Antoine, Amanda was at the house. They chatted for a bit. He gave her the substances that she wanted, and then she left, without Antoine getting anything in return. Now, I may not know much, but Antoine doesn't seem like a guy who would just hand out favors to strangers like that without getting anything in return. This is a very weird line of work, but one thing's for sure, you give and you take. There is no charity. So was Antoine feeling so generous that day that he just decided to give Amanda what she wanted without taking anything? I don't think so. Well, the police were left confused too. They talked to the two men who could or could not be the last people to see Amanda. Neither of them was the most reliable, and now their stories weren't matching up. This went on for a bit, and in the meantime, the search for Amanda was on. Mostly her friends and mom, Leslie, were looking for Amanda in all of the places that they knew that she frequented. But there was no sign of her. Amanda was nowhere to be found. Hours turned into days, days turned into weeks, and then more than a month passed, and no one had any clue where Amanda could be. Her mom was on edge, and she was trying very hard not to lose her mind. The first few hours and days are the most crucial when it comes to missing person cases. But to think that it had been 4 weeks and there was no clue of Amanda, it was very scary. And Amanda's mom and friends had a very bad feeling about this eerie silence. Amanda was trying to get her life back on track. But now she left everyone, and no one knew where she was, if she was even alive or not. Well, that question would soon be answered, and it started with a 911 call. Now, we don't know who the caller was. Reports stated that it was an anonymous caller, and they said that the police could find something in a garbage bin in Buffalo's East Side. Emergency services and police were immediately dispatched, and when they reached the place, it was oddly familiar. Now, it was mainly a church parking lot, but surprisingly, it was in the same place where Antoine Garner lived, the same place where Amanda was allegedly last seen and went for the deal. The officers approached the garbage bin in question, and once they opened it, they were shocked. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this was January of 2009, so it was the dead of winter in New York. So it was freezing outside, not just cold, but miserably so. Well, when police opened the bin, they found something. A frozen body. They didn't know whether it was a man or a woman, and that's because all of the hair on the head of the victim was gone. The head had been shaved. The body was also placed face down in the bin, and there seemed to be marks on the face and neck. The only identifying factor was a butterfly tattoo on the neck, and that's what stopped the police short. Amanda also had a butterfly tattoo on her neck. The police had no choice but to call someone from Amanda's family to formally identify the body, and it was Amanda's own brother who ended up identifying his sister. It must have been unbearable for this guy. It had to have been. He called his mom in hysterics, and he was just in a state of disbelief and just seconds away from losing his mind. It had been over a month with no answers, and now reality was setting in. Amanda was gone forever. The lives of Amanda's loved ones will never be the same again, but little did they know there was more heartache in store for them. The police were highly suspicious of the location of the garbage bin. It had been placed near Antoine's house, so the investigators thought that it was a slam dunk case. But when they talked to Antoine again, he denied everything. He even went as far as saying that if he were to murder Amanda, he wouldn't be so stupid as to dispose of her body right by his home. But anyway, Amanda's body was taken for an autopsy because they needed to determine the cause of death. But this very autopsy would become a huge topic of controversy in Amanda's case. And to date, not one and not two, but 3 autopsies have been performed to figure out how Amanda lost her life. The first autopsy was performed right after Amanda's body was found, and it was concluded that Amanda's cause of death was, wait for it, accidental overdose. Ironically and quite shockingly, there was zero mention of any of the marks on Amanda's body, which were unmistakably bruises and lacerations. The first autopsy concluded that Amanda's death was purely an accident. What the medical officers insinuated was that Amanda, given her history of addiction, got high on the evening of her disappearance, and then somehow shaved her own head, got rid of her clothes, and then fell face first into a garbage bin. Believable? Maybe in a different universe, but not in this one. I mean, you don't need to be a medical examiner with forensic knowledge to know that Amanda was a victim of a brutal attack. Her cause of death could be anything but an accident. And sadly, if the autopsy said that Amanda's passing was an accident, then there were no grounds to probe for murder in court. Well, the second autopsy was performed in November of 2011 because, well, it was obvious it was mandatory. The lawyer representing Amanda's family, Stephen Cohen, hired 2 forensic pathologists, and they requested that Amanda's body be handed over to them for another autopsy. And the things they discovered were absolutely harrowing. Someone had used their bare hands to steal the life of Amanda. There were also defensive wounds on Amanda's body, which were consistent with the fact that she tried to fight off the assailant. Also, the fact that she was found bald and disrobed, upside down in a garbage bin, just proves someone did this to Amanda. But if that weren't bad enough, her tongue was missing. I mean, you can really see the difference between the 2 autopsies. The second autopsy, which is honestly more believable, suggests that Amanda was murdered. Moreover, Stephen Cohen requested another independent toxicology test on Amanda's body. And when the results came out, they suggested Amanda's levels weren't high enough to lead to an overdose or for her to lose her life. She did have drugs in her system, but they weren't enough to kill her. What she did have in her system, though, and a lot of it, was a pretty common roofie drug. Also, and this was pretty much what led to some progress in the case, DNA evidence was found on Amanda's body. 4 different samples of DNA were obtained from Amanda's body. 2 unidentified female profiles, and then DNA belonging to Adam Patterson and Antoine Garner. How the female DNA ended up on her body, we really don't know, but it seems pretty obvious how Adam and Antoine's DNA ended up on her. But this still didn't really answer the main question. Who took her life? This all led to the 3rd and final autopsy being performed on Amanda at the district attorney's order, and it was performed independently by Dr. Scott LaPointe at the beginning of 2012. But in his report, the cause of Amanda's death was undetermined. and some reports it stated that a fourth autopsy was also performed on Amanda's body, but the results were the same: undetermined. Regardless, it yielded no fruitful results because Amanda's death certificate still stated that she'd passed away due to an accidental overdose, thanks to the first mess of an autopsy. And her mom, Leslie, wanted to change that. She wanted to change the cause of death to homicide, and she even sued Erie County and Erie County's chief medical examiner in September of 2021, almost 13 years after her daughter was found tossed in that garbage bin. Leslie's goal was simple. She either wanted the cause of death to be amended as murder or left as undetermined, or to have the Erie County Medical Examiner's Office reopen the investigation to determine the cause of her death properly. But none of that happened because the court dismissed the lawsuit on grounds of being outside the statute of limitations, which is just insane. It had been more than a decade since Amanda was found unarguably murdered, and a handful of autopsies and a lawsuit later, the case was still at a standstill. Can you imagine how Amanda's mom and her loved ones must have been feeling after all these years? Trying to get answers and hitting one roadblock after the other. It's just devastating, but not all hope is lost. Antoine Garner's DNA was found on Amanda's body, and for a while, before the autopsy was conducted, he was a suspicious person in the eyes of the police. But when the autopsy and eventually Amanda's death certificate ruled that her cause of death was an accidental overdose, the investigation pretty much died from that point on, and Antoine was no longer a suspect, not even slightly. But how can anyone just dismiss Antoine and the possibility of his involvement so easily? He was clearly a violent man. He dealt with sketchy people and sketchy things, and he was the last person to see Amanda alive. Also, if you remember, Antoine claimed that he and Amanda never got physically intimate. So why was his DNA on her body? Moreover, Amanda's body was found in a church parking lot, which was steps away from Antoine's house, the last place where Amanda was seen. No matter how you look at it, there's something just not right about Antoine. Although he claimed that someone was setting him up after Amanda's body was found, we can't really say anything for sure. But something happened in 2013, 5 years after Amanda's disappearance. And although it has nothing to do with Amanda, the similarities are uncanny. See, in 2013, Antoine Garner was arrested for several crimes. These included assault and nearly murdering an adult worker whose services he'd paid for. When Garner's crimes were investigated, it was found that he'd committed several felonies between December of 2008 and January of 2009. Does that timeline sound familiar? Because that's exactly when Amanda was reported missing and then found in that garbage bin. Antoine, being the man that he is, had also been caught with a minor and was also arrested for armed robbery. But on top of all this, in June of 2011, police found out that he had hired an adult worker and choked her with his bare hands. Sound familiar? So you can tell what kind of guy Antoine is. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of convincing to picture him as a violent and terrible person who would do anything just to hurt someone who messes with him, or someone who doesn't mess with him for that matter, such as the woman that he held hostage while robbing her home. All in all, the fact that Antoine's DNA was found on Amanda's body, and that he lied about not being intimate with her on the night of her disappearance, it's very suspicious. I just don't personally see how that's possible. But setting Amanda's case aside for a moment, Antoine was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the charges of strangulation, assault, and 2 counts of robbery, and he's still in prison to this day. But he was never charged in Amanda's case. As of present, it's been 16 years since Amanda left her shift at Cocktail Bob's with Adam and went to Antoine's house. It's been approximately 16 years since her frozen body was found in a garbage bin close to Antoine's home. It's been 16 years since the autopsy stated that Antoine and Adam's DNA was on Amanda's body, but no one's been arrested for her murder. We don't know if Antoine was involved, even though a lot of evidence points to him likely having something to do with it. But even if he was, is it possible that Adam was involved somehow as well? After all, he was her manager. He set up the meeting between Antoine and Amanda in the first place. It's been more than a decade since a mother lost her daughter, and as far as anyone knows, the perpetrator still hasn't been punished. Leslie knows that her daughter was murdered, but her long struggle has led to a lot of letdowns and no progress, but she's still fighting for justice. Justice for her daughter, who is more than just an addict or an adult worker. As of April of 2021, new evidence surfaced that pointed to the fact that Antoine may have used a taser or a stun gun to subdue Amanda before he ultimately ended her life. And supporters of this case claim that they have a witness who can testify that Antoine had a stun gun and that he did use it on Amanda. So if these witnesses are proven to be reliable, it adds a whole new layer to the story. Activist and Erie County Sheriff candidate Miles Carter stressed that Amanda's case should be investigated further, either with fresh eyes or by putting the obvious evidence at the forefront. As of 2025, there haven't been any further updates on this case, though. Antoine is still behind bars serving his sentence, and who knows when he'll be let out, but he'll likely be released fairly soon. Hopefully, the investigators on Amanda's case can find that smoking gun that holds the murderer, whoever he is, responsible. Leslie is hopeful, but she's also devastated that she has tried so hard and is still unable to get justice for her daughter. She has no closure. She doesn't even know how to make peace with this horrible situation. It's high time Amanda's case was brought to a close, and a fulfilling one at that. It's the only way to ensure that Amanda didn't lose her life in vain, and that the murderer or murderers are still held responsible for their actions. Amanda wasn't just some life to be thrown away. She was a young woman with hopes, dreams, ambitions, just like the rest of us. She'd made bad decisions that led her to bad places, but she was trying her best to get out of this lifestyle that she'd found herself in, and get things back on track so that she could become a police officer, as she always planned. It's devastating to hear about young women, or anyone for that matter, ending up in such a soul-crushing lifestyle. But we're all one bad day or one bad decision away from our lives really being no better. All we can do is the best we can do, and Amanda tragically was doing just that. And it hurts my heart to see her mother left with so much of a mess after her daughter was stolen from her so violently. This case needs to be solved, and Leslie needs closure. Gareth Williams was originally from Wales, and ever since he was a young kid in school, he was fond of math, numbers, and calculations. He was defined as a math genius, a prodigy, if you will, because he was still in secondary school but was studying mathematics part-time at Bangor University. Gareth graduated with a first-class degree at the age of 17, and he then attended the University of Manchester as well as St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, briefly, before he took employment at the GCHQ in Cheltenham in 2001. At the time that the events unfolded, Gareth lived in a flat located in Pimlico, London, which was basically housing for the staff of the Secret Service. Gareth lived a very private life. He was a single man who had just turned 31, and all that we or anyone knows about him is that he was an avid cyclist. He was very private about his life, which could either be due to the nature of his work, or maybe he just wanted to keep his life private that way. Regardless, it's important to know that Gareth was not in a relationship with anyone at the time. Gareth was amazing at his job as a junior analyst at MI6, since he had a background in math, and he was level-headed, smart, and an athletic man overall. It didn't seem like he had any enemies, but how sure can anyone be when you're talking about a person who almost literally works as a spy to take down shady people and organizations? He led a simple, quiet life. He went to work and came home, and he always wedged in some time for cycling. But one day, completely out of the blue, Gareth disappeared, and no one would hear from Gareth ever again. The police were called for a wellness check on the afternoon of August 23, 2010. Officers were called by Gareth's coworkers who hadn't seen him come to work for about a week. I honestly don't know why the coworkers waited this long to report Gareth's disappearance and lack of contact, though. I mean, you hear in a lot of these true crime cases that if a victim fails to show up for work, then the police are involved often the same day, even if it's been just a couple of hours. But Gareth's coworkers didn't think anything was suspicious and they hadn't seen him for a whole week? Maybe people at Gareth's workplace thought that he was out on a job or something and didn't need to come in. But still, they're his coworkers. They should have known about this change. Also, Gareth hadn't been in contact with anyone for the past week, so this was really out of the ordinary. Sure, Gareth was no social butterfly, but he would call to let his coworkers know that he wasn't coming in for a couple days. It's just all sorts of weird. But regardless, the police knocked on the door to Gareth's home, but they got no answer. They were expecting Gareth to open up his door, but nothing like that happened. It seemed like the house was deathly quiet, and it was. The The police gained access to the house, and they noticed a couple of odd things from the get-go. First, it was super hot in the apartment. The heating was bumped up to the max. Mind you, this was August in the UK. It's already relatively hot, and you don't need a heater to keep the London chill at bay. The house was undeniably hot, so this just rubbed the police the wrong way. Secondly, right by the heater, there were some chairs and a table, and on one of the chairs, there was a woman's wig. On the table, there was a phone that had been reset, and a couple of SIM cards were scattered around the phone too. From the looks of it, someone or multiple people were at Gareth's house, but now everything was deserted and things were left abandoned. The police took note of these things and went upstairs to the bedroom, hopefully to find Gareth. But the bed was in the same state as the rest of the house. Empty. Gareth was nowhere to be found, and this just felt really odd. Next, the police made their way over to the bathroom by the bed, and when they stepped inside, a flash of red caught their attention. It was a large red North Face hold-all, or a sports bag, and it was zipped and padlocked, placed neatly in the center of the bathtub. It was a very bizarre place to find a zipped up and padlocked sports bag smack in the middle of a bathroom, but the police had a very bad feeling about it. Being police officers, they might have seen a lot of disturbing stuff, but nothing could have prepared them for what they saw when they opened up that bag. The police were honestly dumbfounded at the sight of this bag. Something about it just felt wrong and sinister. Before the officers broke into the bag, though, they decided to examine it further. They lifted the bag, but then they immediately regretted it. The bottom of the bag and bathtub were covered in red stains, and a very familiar and deathly smell invaded their nostrils. They knew that whatever was in this bag wasn't going to be a pleasant sight. But still, they managed to unlock the bag, and as they pulled the zipper open, their eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. Unclothed human remains were placed in a contorted position inside the bag, and they were in an advanced stage of decomposition. It was a man's remains, and after examination, it was found that the remains did belong to none other than 31-year-old Gareth Williams. He was MIA for a week, and now he was found lifeless and inside his unusually hot home. What was going on? What was even more bizarre was that the key to the padlock on the sports bag was found inside the bag with Gareth's body. It's all so confusing. It definitely looked like the doing of someone else, but who and why? Why would Gareth be stuffed into a sports bag and left for dead? Well, the autopsy of Gareth's body was just as confusing too. Even though the body was in bad shape, medical examiners were able to determine there was no signs of bruising or any sort of struggle or injury to his body. There were no wounds to suggest foul play aside from a couple of scratches on Gareth's arms, which could have been consistent with him just struggling inside the bag. So did it mean that he was put inside this bag while he was still alive? Well, a toxicology examination was also carried out, and surprisingly, there weren't any weird substances, poison, or toxins in his system. But there was one thing that medical examiners pointed out. See, because the body was found in such a hot environment, medical examiners determined that there could have been substances in the system that had broken down due to heat or couldn't be traced in the toxicology report. So did someone deliberately turn up the heat so that they could tamper with evidence? All sorts of questions were going through the police's minds. Also, the way in which Gareth's body was placed in the bag also raised many questions. It definitely looked like someone else stuffed Gareth's body inside that bag in that position. It just seemed impossible for Gareth to contort his 5'7" self into that bag in that position and then zip and padlock it from the outside with not even an inch of breathing room. He hadn't been taken apart or anything. This grown man was fully intact, folded up inside the sports bag. It's safe to say that Gareth's passing seemed very eerie, and no matter how the police looked at it, it just didn't sit well with them one bit. Well, the police had to get to the bottom of this, so they started by searching the place and swabbing every inch of Gareth's apartment for any DNA. 2 samples of DNA were obtained from the padlock, but to this day, those results remain inconclusive. Inside Gareth's closet, the police found something mysterious, though. They found expensive women's clothing and makeup, estimated to be worth about £25,000. Now, if you remember, Gareth was not in a relationship with anyone, let alone a woman. His neighbors had also never seen a woman come in or out of his apartment, and he was a very private person who kept his window curtains drawn 90% of the time. So this was weird. Next, the police also obtained unidentified DNA from a kitchen towel downstairs, which also didn't match Gareth. Now, talking about the condition of the apartment itself, it was not in a state of disarray, minus the phone and SIM cards and the wig on the table, and even the bedsheet in the master bedroom was on the floor. The police checked for any signs of forced entry, but they couldn't find anything, and moreover, the front door was locked from the outside. So judging by the findings inside the apartment and the way it was left, the police and everyone were certain this was a murder. Someone had murdered Gareth Williams by gaining access into his apartment, possibly drugging him with a substance that couldn't be traced when altered by heat or body decomposition, and then the assailant stuffed the body into a red sports bag, tossed the keys inside too, and then zipped it and shut it and locked it with a padlock to ensure Gareth had no way of letting himself out. Gareth's estimated time of death is assumed to be after August 15th of 2010, because he was last seen on August 15th and had not been in contact with anyone else ever since. But one more thing that everyone found weird was the lack of fingerprints in the bathtub. This bathtub, aside from being soiled at the bottom, was immaculately clean. I'm talking no smudges on the sides, no fingerprints on the walls, inside the tub, on the faucets, nothing. And this stood out to the police. Now, Gareth was not lightweight by any means, so to put his body in the bathtub, someone must have boosted themselves onto the edge of the tub, or at least held onto the bathtub for support while placing the bag inside of it. But from the looks of it, that didn't seem to be the case. But I mean, the bag couldn't have levitated into the tub by itself. If someone had done this, they literally planned everything in advance and made sure that they left no trace behind. Either they got rid of their prints or they used gloves, I'm not sure. We can only speculate here, but aside from the DNA found on the padlock, there was no other trace on the bathroom, on the handles of the bag, or anything. As morbid as it sounds, the deed was done pretty cleanly, so police, they had no idea what was going on. Gareth's murder was a puzzle. Everyone from the Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, and even the FBI got involved in the case and conducted their own investigations, but everything led to nothing. The Metropolitan Police determined Gareth's death to be suspicious and unexplained, and with all of the details coming, new theories also surfaced, and some of them were extremely bizarre. First of all, the presence of women's clothing and makeup in Gareth's apartment led to the suspicion that Gareth was interested in dressing up as a female. But this claim was rejected in a verdict by the coroner. Though it was briefly believed that Gareth did dress up as a woman, and he might have done so to do undercover work, in the end it was determined this had nothing to do with his murder, and it was only a media manipulation tactic to make the case more sensationalized. Another theory suggested that Gareth was obsessed with escapology. Basically, it's the practice of restraining yourself and then escaping from those restraints. Houdini stuff. This theory came to light when Gareth's landlady came forward and told the police that one time, Gareth was heard screaming in his flat, which caused her to break into his apartment, and she ended up finding him tied to the bed. When the landlady asked why Gareth had done this, she was told that he was trying to see if he could get himself free. The fact that he's an MI6 agent makes this theory all the more believable. But still, the sports bag thing is particularly weird. If he couldn't break the restraints on his bed, what made him think he could escape from a padlocked sports bag? It was also believed that Gareth often visited adult websites, and apparently he just had a fascination with restraining himself. But again, this claim was rejected by the coroner, who concluded that Gareth seldom visited these websites, so it wasn't like he was actually obsessed with tying himself up to the point of madness. He did visit these websites, but he wasn't fixated on the idea, which doesn't directly lead to the potential development of an interest. Also, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. See, the investigators on Gareth's case tried more than 400 times to reenact the way Gareth was found in that locked sports bag, but they were unsuccessful in the end. It was just impossible for Gareth to get into that bag, contort himself into the position he was found in, and then zip the bag and padlock it. There was literally no space in between the zippers that were padlocked, not even enough to wedge a couple of fingers out and secure the lock into place. Also, I'm sure that if Gareth was trying to do some sort of escape exercise, he would have been prepared. If he knew that getting out of the bag was going to be hard, then he should have had a knife or a pair of scissors on hand to get out of the bag. And why would he do all of this without any clothes on? I personally don't believe Gareth would have been unprepared, even if he was doing this as some form of training. He was a smart guy. He can't just jump into a bag without a plan B. A lot of people thought that Gareth had tried to end his own life, but again, this theory just wasn't very plausible. There wasn't anything bothering Gareth at the time, and he was his normal self the last time that he spoke with his family. Also, the method he apparently chose to end his life was a really weird one. Why would he go through all this trouble just to end it all? Not to sound depressing or give anyone any ideas, but there are lots of other ways to go about this. And why would Gareth turn the heat up so much? He wouldn't possibly care about how hot or cold the apartment was if he planned to end it all. The excessive heating in the apartment could only mean one thing, and that was to accelerate the decomposition of Gareth's body, and to make it hard to find any conclusive evidence. And I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Well, Gareth's family, on the other hand, strongly believed that there was someone who wanted Gareth gone. They don't know who, but based on his line of work, he dabbled in some pretty shady stuff. So who's to say he couldn't have been targeted by someone who had a vendetta against him? To this day, Gareth Williams' death is still a huge debate among detectives. Interestingly, in 2015, Russia somehow became involved in Gareth's passing, and it was rumored that the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, also known as the SVR, may have been responsible for Gareth's murder. It was rumored that Gareth knew someone who was a rat within the GCHQ, and he was about to spill the beans, but the SVR got wind of this, and they had no choice but to end his life to protect the insider in GCHQ. But this claim was never confirmed, and for the most part, investigators believe they've debunked this, at least to some degree. In the end, and very recently in 2024, another evidence review was held, and it was concluded that no one else aside from Gareth was in that apartment when he passed away, and his death was ruled an accident, and his family even supported this conclusion. Even though Gareth's death was listed as an accident in the end, it is still a very eerie incident. No one to this day knows what happened to Gareth, or how and when exactly he lost his life. It's just one big mystery stuffed in a red sports bag and locked up tight. "40-year-old Anna Knezovich Henao was an avid traveler, having lived in Colombia, migrating to the US after college, and having been to Europe and Austria on various trips. So what happened on February 3rd, 2024, when she texted her friends and family and was never seen again? Her apartment in the Salamanca neighborhood of Madrid, Spain was empty, and Anna had essentially vanished. The case of Anna's disappearance has left the FBI and Spanish police department confused. When Anna's case became the center of international attention, everyone had theories of their own. Maybe Anna's disappearance was a targeted hit. Maybe it was a stranger who took advantage of a lone woman. But shortly after, mind-boggling evidence came out that left everyone stunned and speechless. And the investigators tracked the paper trail down to the one person Anna was closest to. But Ana Maria Henao was born in 1984 in Colombia. Her family consisted of her parents and her younger brother, Juan Felipe Henao. Even though not much is known about her childhood and upbringing, Anna's family and friends defined her as a headstrong, loving, and caring woman. Anna attended EA Fit University in Colombia, where she studied international business and business administration and management from the years of 2000 to 2005. She even earned certifications in quality management, project management, and human resource management. Once she graduated, she worked as an administrator and manufacturing manager, and then she joined Kodak Colombia in 2001, where she was appointed as the administrator of health equipment services. After working there for about 4 years in 2005, Anna made the decision to move to the US, which she felt was the best decision of her life. She settled in Florida, where she worked as a general manager for Alex Dominguez and Associates, a nonprofit mental health organization that worked for children with special needs, mainly focusing on autism. Anna worked in the nonprofit industry for about 5 years, from 2005 to 2010, and she loved every second of it. Anna was a smart and ambitious woman who craved challenges and worked around problems to find a solution. But Anna wasn't a workaholic by any means. She loved her quiet time just as much. She loved reading books, cooking, and reconnecting with nature. Her favorite outdoor activity was hiking. Sticking to her Colombian roots, Anna loved Colombian coffee, and she defined it as her fuel to keep going. Anna was also very helpful and charitable, and her brother Juan is forever grateful for everything his sister had done for her. Ana was the type of person who loved seeing other people soar. She didn't just want herself to be successful, but she also wanted to share her insights and experiences with other people as well. Juan recalled a very touching moment involving Ana when she paid for his plane tickets and even got him a laptop when Juan was moving to England to do volunteer work in an organization for people with disabilities. Ana even encouraged Juan to go, saying that these were going to be the best years of his life. And it turned out she was right. Juan enjoyed doing volunteer work, and Ana, being the caring and generous person she was, even offered Juan a job at her company in Florida. Juan owed everything he had to his sister. Juan was thankful to have a caring sister like Ana who wanted to see him grow and become the best version of himself. He even stated, quote, "It's basically all because of her. I always told her this. If it weren't for her, I don't know what I'd be doing." It's just so heartwarming to see that Ana and Juan had an amazing relationship, and Ana, with her nurturing and motherly nature, changed Juan's life for the better. Ana was also a die-hard animal lover. She loved dogs, and she even had a puppy at the time of the case. By all accounts, she was a wonderful woman with a warm and genuine smile and a personality that made everyone want to hang out with her. But Ana, during her time as a general manager at the nonprofit health organization, met someone significant, and this person would change Ana's life in every sense of the word. Ana met David Knezovich, an IT specialist who originally came from Serbia, who moved to the US just like Ana. Not much is known about David, but what we do know is that David was a seasoned computer specialist. He studied computer science at the University of Educational Sciences in Belgrade, Serbia. David also worked for Telx as a senior engineer and data center virtualization architect. In 2010, he met Ana, and in 2011, the couple got married, and together in 2012, they established their own business called EOX Technology Solutions, located in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Ana and David were perfect for each other. Both were highly ambitious and were great leaders, and they eventually wanted to work in the field of IT and cybersecurity. Ana and David built their business from the ground up, and initially it was David who was working in the company full-time before he persuaded Ana to join him, and the rest is history. In December of 2010, Ana was working as a project manager at EOX and helped many small business owners in all things IT. Ana and David seemed like the perfect power couple. Ana was the manager with the mindset of growing together, while David was the quintessential cutthroat businessman. And together they transformed their lifelong dream into a thriving business. They even had several properties, including 2 in Fort Lauderdale. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. See, even though Ana and David's professional life was great, their personal life was anything but. Ana and David's relationship fell apart, and after 13 years of marriage in 2023, the couple's marriage reached the end of the road. It wasn't just a rocky path, though. Ana and David were separated a few months prior to the events of the case, and they were considering divorce near the end of 2023. But what happened soon after, no one could have anticipated. Ana and David, while going through a divorce, were separated. Ana wanted a bit of a change in her life, so she decided to pack her bags and book a flight from Florida to Madrid, Spain. Ana was obviously an avid traveler, and she loved experiencing different cultures in different cities, so Spain was the perfect place for her to go to get her mind off of things. Ana went to Madrid on December 27, 2023, rented an apartment on Francisco Silvela Street in the Salamanca Quarter, and was in contact with her family and friends back in the US. Ana's best friend, Sana Ramo, remembered that Ana was in love with Spain and its unique culture. She even remembered Ana expressing her wish to live in Madrid permanently. Sana and Ana were not only best friends, but they also traveled together. Ana went to meet Sana in Austria earlier in January, and Sana even had made plans to visit Ana in Madrid on February 8th. According to Sana, Ana was depressed because of the ongoing divorce proceedings, but she was seeing her therapist regularly and even was taking her medication to help with these depressive thoughts. Sana even expressed Ana's wish to work with a non-profit organization in Spain for abused women after she was done with her split from her estranged husband, David. Ana even had plans to meet up with a friend on February 5th to go to a conference in Barcelona. Now, according to CCTV footage, Ana was seen walking back to her Madrid apartment that she'd rented at about 2:30 p.m. Later that night, Ana also called her friend, and she sounded very happy and excited for her trip to Barcelona on February 5th. Anna didn't sound sad, scared, or anxious. It was a very normal call, and everything seemed fine. But fast forward to February 3rd, and everything got weird. And Santa was the first one to sense that something wasn't right. Santa was minding her own business when she received 2 messages from Anna on WhatsApp. Santa was excited to hear from her friend, but as soon as she read the texts, she got a very uncomfortable and sinking feeling in her stomach. It seemed like the texts were from Anna, and they basically entailed that she met a wonderful man on the street and that he was taking her to his home, which was about 2 hours from Madrid, where cell phone service was going to be spotty. The second message explained how Anna met this wonderful man. And apparently, Anna, after a therapy session on February 2nd, went for a walk and bumped into the mystery man. The message also stated that the two clicked and that it was an instant connection, nothing like Anna had ever experienced before. Santa, upon reading these texts, immediately replied to Anna. She knew that something was wrong, and she pleaded with Anna to share her location or give her more information about the man. But Anna didn't respond to any of Santa's frantic texts. The reason why it was so bizarre for Anna to up and leave with a random man, who she had an instant connection with, was that firstly, she never mentioned meeting any man on the call with her friend earlier that same day. So the timeline mentioned in the texts didn't make any sense. Anna sounded happy and was looking forward to meeting her friend in Barcelona, and that was that. If Anna had met someone, surely she would have mentioned it to her close friend, who knew everything about her life. Secondly, Anna would never have ditched her friend for a random man she met in her Madrid neighborhood. Remember, Anna and her friend had plans to go to Barcelona just 2 days after Santa received those creepy and cryptic messages from Anna. This was very unlike her. Anna wasn't the impulsive or irresponsible type, so Anna ditching her plans with her friend sounded unbelievable to Santa. Thirdly, and this was also something that stood out to Santa the most, was the fact that the messages didn't sound like Anna at all. They felt very flat, unemotional, and lacked personality. Everyone has a specific text tone when they type. It's hard to explain, but everyone types and expresses their feelings in texts in a different way. And from what Santa was reading, she was certain that the texts weren't from Anna. But Santa wasn't the only one to receive weird messages from Anna. Her own brother, Juan, received a text from Anna in Spanish, and Juan also felt weirded out after reading the WhatsApp text. It was typed in Spanish, but again, this wasn't the way Anna spoke in her candid text conversations. The dialect was different, as if someone had written a message in English and then translated it with Google Translate. Anyway, Santa, understandably shaken up by the weird messages, decided to call Anna's friend in Madrid, and then the Spanish authorities. 2 days passed, and February 5th rolled around, but Anna failed to show up to meet her friend for their Barcelona trip. This intensified the fear that Anna's friends were feeling, and on the same day, 40-year-old Anna Knezovich was officially reported missing to the police. The detectives started by searching Anna's apartment, and they found nothing that was out of the ordinary, aside from the fact that Anna wasn't there. There were no signs of a robbery, the house wasn't messy or turned over, and there was seemingly nothing suspicious about the apartment, although Anna's phone, laptop, and chargers were nowhere to be found. Now, we don't know whether the authorities did an extensive turn-the-place-upside-down search of Anna's apartment, or if they just looked around and took the condition of the apartment at face value. Some reports also state that the people conducting the search were firefighters, not proper investigators, so this could have played a role in clues being missed. Since the Spanish police department didn't release much information about the case, the details are still up in the air and quite vague. On February 7th, 4 days after Santa and Juan received those WhatsApp texts from Anna, Juan actually spoke to the investigators and revealed something very pivotal about Anna and her personal life. According to Juan, since Anna and David were in the midst of a very messy divorce, there was a lot of money on the line to be split between the two. Moreover, David, Anna's estranged husband, wasn't happy about the division of their assets. He felt that he was entitled to more than his fair share. There was something definitely wrong in Anna and David's relationship from the get-go. And even Anna's brother told the detectives that Anna and David, even though they were very affectionate towards each other, had problems in their marriage, and even tried several times to salvage their relationship. But things came to a fateful end in early 2023, when Anna tearfully confided in her family about her split and pending divorce with David. as the police were looking further into Anna's disappearance, some very bizarre things came forth. First, on February 2nd, the day Anna was last seen, CCTV cameras caught something very unsettling. See, on the same day, at around 9:27 p.m., surveillance cameras caught a man waiting outside the building where Anna was living. Now, this might have been something normal, if not for the next two details. The man was wearing a motorcycle helmet, but he didn't own a bike. If that wasn't alarming enough, the man wasn't able to enter the building, as he didn't have a key card, nor did he even live there. So he was waiting for people to come in or out so that he could slip in the front door behind them. But there were more odd things that took place. Not long after the man entered the building, still wearing the helmet, he proceeded to spray the surveillance cameras with black spray paint, disabling them. He even fumbled with the main entry of the building by fastening a piece of duct tape onto the lock to keep it from engaging. The man can be seen with most of his face covered, but his eyebrows and eyes were visible as he spray painted every single surveillance camera that he saw. Afterwards, almost an hour passed by, and around 10:30 p.m., the same man was seen getting off the elevator, but this time he was seen wheeling a suitcase. But this is where things get even more weird and confusing. See, Santa, after days of trying to contact Anna, reached out to none other than David, her soon-to-be ex-husband, and asked if he was willing to go to Madrid with her to look for his missing wife. To Santa's surprise, David had left Florida and he was currently back in Serbia. So if David was in Serbia, then who was the man in the helmet? And what was his motive? Did he really abduct or harm Anna? And moreover, if the man in the footage was David, like the detective suspected, then why did he lie to Santa in the first place? The police were left with more questions than ever. But one thing was for sure. David was now on their radar. The most crucial task on hand for the investigators was to figure out who the man in the helmet was. When the footage of the man was cross-matched with the picture of David, there were a lot of similarities. The man's height matched David's height. The perpetrator's eyes and eyebrows also matched David's. The detectives were also able to track down the store from where a can of spray paint and a few rolls of duct tape were bought, and the person in the CCTV footage was none other than Anna's estranged husband, David. But wasn't he in Serbia at the time that Anna disappeared? Why was he in a store hundreds of miles from where he said he was supposed to be? Well, this revelation raised a lot of suspicion for the police, and they went ahead and tracked David's movements before Anna disappeared. It's alleged that David did go to Serbia, but not exactly. On January 27th, he flew from Miami to Istanbul, Turkey, and then finally to Serbia. Upon reaching Serbia, he rented a car on January 29th. The police contacted the rental car company in Serbia, and they confirmed that the vehicle was returned, but with a lot of mileage. 800 miles to be exact. Also, the windows had been tinted, and there were stolen license plates found. It's speculated that David used the car to travel to Spain, and on February 22nd, he was seen in a Madrid hardware store buying spray paint and duct tape with cash. The license plates that were stolen in Madrid were also checked by investigators' car readers, and they were spotted near a motorcycle shop where the same helmet the mysterious man was wearing was purchased, as well as on Francisco Silvela Street, the same street where Anna was renting her apartment. Horrifically, on the same night that she disappeared. What was even more alarming was the fact that after the suspicious man left Anna's apartment building with a suitcase, the same vehicle with the stolen license plate was seen on multiple Madrid toll booth cameras. The camera was unable to make out the driver since the windows were tinted, but it seemed that David was trying to be as discreet as possible by covering his tracks. But why was he doing this? Why would he go through all of these lengths? And why was he afraid of getting trailed? Furthermore, on February 3rd, David allegedly reached out to a Colombian woman he was talking to on a dating app, and he asked her out of the blue to translate some messages for him in, quote, perfect Colombian Spanish. David wasn't fluent in Spanish and only knew how to speak English, whereas Anna was bilingual, having fluency in both Spanish and English. The woman later reached out to the police, and when they showed her the messages that Anna had sent her friends and brother, the woman confirmed that those were the exact messages David had asked her to translate. Fast forward to April of 2024, an employee of David's reached out to the authorities with yet another odd occurrence. According to the employee, David had asked her to impersonate Anna to open a new bank account, and he even went as far as giving the employee Anna's social security number. The employee eventually refused as she felt uncomfortable impersonating her boss's missing wife. Anna's disappearance is being led by the FBI, along with the Spanish and Serbian detective departments. The main motive, according to police, is money. David and Anna owned properties worth millions of dollars, and since the couple was on the verge of a divorce, it meant that the money had to be divided equally. And since they were in Florida, Anna was due to receive 50% of the assets after divorce. This might have been something that David didn't appreciate, and he had no choice but to come up with such an elaborate and evil plan to allegedly kidnap his wife in another country. It's just so unnerving to see how David meticulously planned every step of his vile plan, all for money. On May 4th, with all of the evidence against David for his involvement in Anna's disappearance, he was arrested in Miami International Airport and charged with the kidnapping of 40-year-old Anna Henao. He was transported to the Federal Detention Center in downtown Miami because, given his wealth and connections in other countries, he was a danger to the community as well as a flight risk. But get this, David had sold 6 Florida rental homes to a single buyer, and that too a month before Anna disappeared. 3 weeks after which, David sold another property to a different buyer. The sales totaled a whopping $6 million, and police were afraid that if David had access to this money, he could easily flee the country. After his arrest, David appeared in front of a court on June 10th of 2024 and pleaded not guilty to kidnapping his wife. His defense lawyer also went on to negate the claims made by the prosecution that David could flee the country. According to him, David has no access to money, and therefore he can't flee the country. The Henao family, on the other hand, expressed their concerns about when Anna confided in them about her heated divorce with David. According to the prosecution, Anna was scared of David, since she fought his contention of receiving more than half of the assets, and this was the main reason why their divorce was getting tough and messy. David's defense, on the other hand, stressed that the separation was amicable and that the financial agreements were sorted out between the two. As of June 18, 2024, a tentative trial date was set for July 23rd, but it was delayed later on. In August of 2024, David applied for bail, which was denied on the grounds that he was a flight risk. But that didn't stop him from applying a second time, but it was also denied as recently as September 10th. Judge Torres also overthrew the defense's attack on the prosecution, which apparently has no jurisdiction to charge David for kidnapping in Miami, as Anna disappeared in Spain. Judge Torres further added that there was ample evidence to support the kidnapping case on David. So what's next? Well, the disappearance of Anna Knežević Henao is still an ongoing case. Even though the main suspect, David Knežević, Anna's husband, is in police custody, there's still one very heartbreaking aspect of this case, and that's the fact that Anna, to this day, still hasn't been found. In August, firefighters flooded the heavily wooded areas of the province of Vicenza in Italy in hopes of finding Anna, although the results have not been fruitful. If Anna is still out there alive, then her family hasn't heard from her. Even though the Henao family is clinging on to hope that Anna is still alive and well, the chances of that happening are realistically and sadly very low. To this day, Anna's phone, her missing belongings, as well as the mysterious suitcase haven't been recovered. It's alleged by the FBI that David, on the night of February 2nd, attacked Anna and transported her body in the suitcase and discarded it somewhere along with her phone and laptop. But this is just speculation, as neither David has confessed to anything yet, nor has the suitcase been discovered by anyone. It seems that the only people who know what went down on that fateful day of February 2nd are David and Anna, who's still missing. Statistically, if a missing person doesn't show up or contact their family within 72 hours, then it's highly likely that they are unfortunately deceased. And in Anna's case, whose disappearance was in a foreign country, the chances are even slimmer. Even so, the Henao family, in a state of grief, are still hoping that Anna will get justice. Anna's brother Juan stated, quote, "We trust the American authorities and the justice system. We trust that they're going to make justice for my sister. That's all that we want." Just the whole unraveling of evidence and events in Anna's case has been unfulfilling. As of now, 7 months into the disappearance of Anna in Madrid, everyone is looking forward to David's trial, the exact date of which is still not known. We can only hope that at the end of the trial, justice is served, and if David really is the mastermind behind this disgusting plan, that he has to face the consequences for his heinous actions. Normally, cases like this seem fairly open and shut, and I'll usually offer my opinion at the end, But in this case, I'm just not so sure. It seems glaringly obvious that David was almost certainly involved in Anna's disappearance. But the issue I'm personally having is that all of the evidence is pretty shaky. We don't have anything concrete. When you look at a case like this, you hope to see obvious CCTV footage, maybe DNA left behind, fingerprints or something. But instead, all we have is a theory that David is the man in the motorcycle helmet. A fragile witness statement that David was probably the guy who requested the translated text messages, and a coworker who David asked to help him commit a felony. Now, let's be real. Anyone with half a brain knows that all of these things are highly suspicious, and it's almost certain that David was involved in Anna's disappearance. But when you bring these things up in the context of a court of law, I'm just not sure it'll be enough to lead to a conviction. I just hope that regardless of the outcome of this trial, that Anna's family can find the closure they're looking for. It would be even better if Anna were to be found alive somewhere, but we all know that the chances of this happening are incomprehensibly small. More than anything, I just hope that Anna's family finds the answers they're looking for. Matt Baker served as a Baptist minister at the Crossroads Baptist Church in Hewitt, Texas, back in 2006. He and his wife Kari were well known in their community, and from the outside, their marriage seemed perfect. The couple met while they were both still students at Baylor University in Waco, and they immediately hit it off. Just 3 months later, they would tie the knot at Kari's parents' house, and following this, Matt would attend the George W. Truett Theological Seminary at Baylor University, where he completed his studies to become a pastor. The future looked bright for the young couple, since they were both active in the church and had found happiness in each other. That joy would only grow when they had 3 daughters, Kinsey, Cassidy, and Grace. But things would take a tragic turn when Cassidy was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 1998. Once the tumor was found, she started receiving treatment that at first seemed promising, and she was released from the hospital. But in March of the following year, Matt found her unresponsive in her bedroom and realized she'd sadly passed away. And this understandably brought Kari's world crashing down around her. Due to the effect that the tragedy had on her, Kari started attending counseling sessions and would often remember her daughter by writing passages about her in her Bible. This, along with her faith and her 2 other daughters, kept her going during a time that many people would have found too hard to endure. But no one could have foreseen the events that were about to unfold in the family's household. It all started with a 911 call that Matt made a few minutes past midnight on the 8th of April, 2006. Matt told the operator that he left the house to get a movie and to put gas in his car. But when he returned, he was shocked to find Kari lying lifeless on their bed with a note and an empty bottle of sleeping tablets next to her. The note read, quote, "Matt, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep for a while. Please forgive me. Tell Kinsey and Grace that I love them very much. Please continue to be a great dad for our little girls. Love them every day for me. I'm sorry. I love you, Kari." He told the operator that he had tried to revive his wife, and when he realized that she wasn't breathing, and since she wasn't clothed, he started trying to dress her one hand at a time while speaking to 911 on the phone, which he had trapped between his ear and one of his shoulders. The operator then instructed him to start administering CPR, which he did, and when EMS arrived, they took over. But Kari was pronounced deceased when they were unsuccessful. Matt then supplied investigators with the details of what had happened that night. He stated that he left the house at around 11:10 p.m. because he wanted to rent a movie, and while he was out, he decided that he might as well get gas for the car. He was surprised when, upon his return, he found his and Kari's bedroom door locked, and she wouldn't answer when he knocked. He became concerned that something was wrong and grabbed a screwdriver, and he was able to lever the door open, and the door lock finally popped and he stepped inside. He found Kari lying on the bed with her arms outstretched. He then managed to dress her in a t-shirt and underwear while speaking to the 911 operator. To everyone at the scene, it seemed that Cassidy's passing had just been too much for Kari, something that most parents would never judge her for. Jim and Linda Doolin, Kari's mother and father, were informed of what had happened, and they raced over to the house in disbelief. They knew that Kari had been struggling, but never imagined that she would take her own life. But it wouldn't take long for their suspicions to be roused when Linda was told by her 3 sisters that Matt wasn't as clean-cut as he pretended to be. They knew of multiple women who Matt had made advances towards while serving as their minister, but they decided not to say anything since they didn't want to cause trouble in his and Kari's marriage. Since she was still in disbelief over the ruling that Kari had ended her own life, she decided to do some investigating, starting with Matt and Kari's cell phones that had just been added to her and Jim's plan. She immediately found something strange. In the weeks after Kari had passed away, Matt had been placing calls to her number. In one instance, he'd called that number 17 times, and in total, he had dialed it 180 times. She then found out that the phone was no longer in Matt's possession, since he'd given it to a member of his congregation, a woman named Vanessa Bowles. Linda then contacted Bill Johnston, a former assistant district attorney and assistant U.S. attorney who, along with U.S. Marshal Mike Nemera and Agent John Bennett, started their own investigation. They were able to confirm that Matt was somewhat of a ladies' man, since he'd made advances to women not only while he and Kari were married, but also while they were dating, and while he was still in college. As is often the case, things started to look even more suspicious when they checked Matt's internet history. He'd not only visited several adult websites, but more alarmingly, had performed searches for terms that alluded to taking someone's life with sleeping pills, as well as an overdose. He also researched how one would go about obtaining the sleeping pill Ambien without the need for a prescription. Everyone involved started to feel that something untoward was going on here, and the police had missed many details that pointed towards Kari's passing being a homicide rather than her taking her own life. Through much trial and effort, Johnson was able to eventually convince the authorities that there was a need to have an autopsy conducted. And 3 months after that tragic night, this was finally done. And the results were interesting. Since so much time had passed, it would have been impossible to find medications in Kari's blood. But the results showed that she had a type of sleeping medication called Unisum in her muscle tissue. This can be purchased over the counter. Ambien, the drug that Matt had researched, was also found, which was strange since Kari was never known to have taken that particular pill. Following these findings, the ruling was changed to an undetermined cause of death. Not only were there inconsistencies as far as Kari's passing was concerned, but there were now also rumors that Matt had been having an affair with Vanessa Bowles, to whom he'd gifted his wife's phone. Investigators realized that everything was not as it seemed, and they started suspecting that Matt may have ended Kari's life. He was arrested in September of 2007 and charged with claiming the life of his wife, but thanks to his defense attorney, Guy James Gray, he was released on bond. Gray was certain that Matt was innocent, and on one occasion told a news outlet that he only accepts cases that he has absolute faith in. He believed that it would be impossible to establish the cause of Kari's passing, and that prosecutors would not be able to prove that this was a homicide. Linda was even more upset when she found out that the assistant district attorney had decided to drop all charges against Matt just 6 months later, since he felt that the evidence in the case was merely speculative, and that it could not be proven that a crime had been committed. But she refused to give up without a fight. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Matt. It would be a civil case, but she hoped that the authorities would uncover further evidence during their investigations, and that they would eventually be able to build a criminal case against him. Matt had to endure a deposition, during which he would be questioned under oath. Johnston later remarked that Matt could have opted to remain silent at this point, but likely because he wanted to make it seem like he had nothing to hide, chose to answer his questions instead. He denied ever having an intimate relationship with Vanessa Bowles or anyone else while married to Kari. But much of his testimony regarding the events of that night didn't seem to add up. He stated that while he was talking to the 911 operator, it took him mere seconds to dress his wife, despite the fact that she was unresponsive and that he had to do it mostly one-handed. But Matt's defense attorney still had the upper hand. All the evidence against Matt was circumstantial and speculative at best, and unless prosecutors were able to speak to Vanessa, it seemed likely the case wouldn't go much further. When investigators interviewed her on an earlier occasion, she admitted that she and Matt had been seeing each other, but insisted they only started doing so after Kari had passed away. But she'd failed to convince Linda and the prosecution. It had come to light that Matt and Vanessa had been seen at a jewelry store in the weeks after the incident, and that they'd been looking at wedding rings. It seemed implausible that they would consider getting married if they'd only been dating for such a short time. but stranger things have happened. They also found Vanessa's demeanor to be deceitful, either because she was lying or because she was withholding information that could prove detrimental to Matt's case. To get to the truth, Vanessa was ordered to testify in Matt's case, where she would come face to face with a grand jury. To ensure her full cooperation, Vanessa was told that she would not face any consequences as a result of her testimony. But she was told that if she was found to be lying under oath, she would be charged with perjury. When she finally appeared in court, she insisted that she had told the police the truth. But she would then suddenly make a startling confession when asked whether Matt had ever discussed that night with her. She confessed that during one of their meetings, he told her that he wanted to tell her what had happened, and that he would only do it this one time. After that, it would never be discussed again. His exact words to Vanessa were, "I killed her for you." When speaking with Vanessa about the crimes against Kari, he went into further detail, telling her that he'd emptied out a few of Kari's medication capsules and replaced their contents with Ambien. He then made sure that Kari took them, and when she started to get drowsy, he helped her to the bedroom. There, he handcuffed her to the bed, and she soon drifted off. He remembered that she started snoring, and this is when he enacted his plan. He kissed her on the forehead, told her to give Cassidy a hug for him, then started smothering her with the pillow. When his heinous act was complete, he uncuffed her and typed out the note that was found beside Kari, making sure to rub it on her hands so that her fingerprints would be present. He then staged the scene and left the house to ensure that he would have an alibi. The police officers who attended the scene never thought to check Matt's computer, which they soon discovered still contained the note that he had typed, and it was never confiscated as evidence. She also revealed that Matt had sent her an MP3 file of the All-American Rejects song Dirty Little Secret, and I think the implications are clear here. He told her to keep all of this information to herself lest she wanted to become his next regret. It should be noted that by this point, Matt and Vanessa were no longer dating, as she had already ended the relationship. Linda was elated at the news that so much information was gathered against Matt, and he was arrested once again in March of 2009. He was again charged with ending Kari's life, but this time the prosecution would have Vanessa on their side, something that would likely not have set well with Matt. It took about 4 years to get to this point, but for everyone who was close to Kari, the wait was well worth it just to see justice done. Matt continued to profess his innocence and insisted that he and Vanessa never had an affair. The court and everyone in attendance were expecting Matt and his defense attorney, Guy James Gray, to continue asserting that he never had been intimate with Vanessa. But to everyone's surprise, Gray stood up in court and proclaimed that he had been fooled by his client, who now admitted that he had cheated on his wife. He would later admit that this revelation took the wind out of his sails and that he no longer wanted to defend Matt, since it went against his policy to defend someone that he didn't have 100% confidence in. He requested to be removed from the case, but Matt insisted that he remain with his lawyer, and the court agreed. He did state that just because Matt wouldn't initially own up to the fact that he'd been unfaithful, it didn't mean that he was guilty, though the fact that he'd been lying for almost 4 years painted him in a less than favorable light. Instead, he focused on Kari's depression after Cassidy passed away. He reiterated that she was using a mix of medications that included sleeping pills, and that this would have made it easy for her to end her own life. But we can't forget the fact that she was never prescribed Ambien specifically, even though Ambien was found to have been in her system. Furthermore, he reminded the jury that no cause of death had been established, and hence they couldn't convict anyone of claiming her life. But luckily, Matt wasn't the only one who was aware of Kari's state of mind. Many of her friends told investigators that although she was finding it hard to deal with her daughter's passing, she was no longer depressed. This was confirmed by her grief counselor, who'd also shared another detail from the case. During her testimony, Linda told the court that the grief counselor spoke to her one day and told her that Kari had found crushed up pills in Matt's suitcase. She also revealed that she was afraid of Matt, or rather, afraid that he was planning to harm her in one way or another. She questioned Matt about the pills, but he assured her that they didn't belong to him, and that they'd likely been put in his briefcase by one of the people present at a youth center where he worked. He told her that as soon as he realized they were in his briefcase, he reported it to the youth center's security, but no record of such a report was ever found. As the case continued, more and more of Matt's statements about that night just didn't seem to make sense, and it seemed as though his case was starting to fall apart. The prosecution then started focusing on his claims of what happened after he found Kari unresponsive. They expressed their doubts about his ability to not only dress Kari in just 4 minutes without any help, but also the fact that he'd performed CPR while talking to the 911 operator on his phone. He'd also stated that he found Kari lying on her back with her arms outstretched. But photos from the scene prove that lividity had already set in. This term means that a deceased person's blood has started to settle towards the lowest parts of their body. Since the photos show that more lividity had occurred on Kari's left arm, they suggested that this arm may have been hanging off the bed, which is contradictory to the way Matt claimed to have found her. The next witness to take the stand was a man who owned a website in Japan. He told the court that his online pharmacy section of his website was accessed by Matt before Kari's passing, and that he placed an order for Ambien, but that he failed to complete the transaction. The case had grown in intensity by this point. There was still no telling what the jury would decide, but the atmosphere in the courtroom was about to get even more intense, as the time had come for Vanessa to take the stand. When asked whether she had lied about having an affair with Matt, Vanessa immediately admitted that she had been untruthful. She then recounted meeting Matt in church one day in 2005. At the time, she was in the process of getting divorced and had been having a difficult time adjusting to life as a single mother. She went to church and was sitting by herself when Matt sat down next to her and they started talking. They would often meet up after that, and at times he would talk to Vanessa about Kari. He explained that she was growing ever more depressed and that she wasn't taking care of their children anymore. Given that he was her minister, Vanessa believed every word, and so didn't find it strange that he'd asked her to come to his house for counseling. While praying together, he took hold of her hands and kissed her, which caught her off guard, and she stated that this is when the affair started. He would then often tell her that he wanted Kari out of his life, and that he had, on several occasions, spoken about ways in which he could end her life without being caught. He considered drugging a milkshake, tampering with her car's brakes, or ending her life in a drive-by. He'd also spoken about making it seem as though she had taken too many sleeping pills. He'd even gone as far as to tell her what date on which he planned to end Kari's life, the 7th of April, 2006, since this was close to the date that Cassidy had passed away. Committing the act on this date would make it easy for him to claim that Kari had taken her own life since it was close to the anniversary of Cassidy's passing, and hence would make his claims that she was depressed more believable. Unfortunately, Vanessa kept all of this information to herself rather than reporting it to the police, and preventing Matt from claiming the life of his wife in the first place. It's a factor in this case that Linda still struggles to come to terms with, especially since Vanessa had been granted immunity and could not be charged for withholding such information. Vanessa claimed that she chose not to speak up because she was worried that no one would believe her, given Matt's position as a minister. She also didn't think that he would do the same thing to her, despite being told by him that she would become his next regret if she didn't keep it secret. In Matt's defense, Gray asked an expert witness about DNA found on the note that was found next to Kari. He testified that Kari's DNA was by far the most abundant, which indicated to the defense that she had indeed typed it and printed it out, since she would have handled the paper more than anyone else. Soon enough, the trial was over, and all that was left was for the jury to make their decision. They left the courtroom, and Linda, along with the prosecution, were hopeful that they would return quickly, since this is usually a good sign that a guilty verdict had been reached. But over the next 7 hours, their hopes started to fade, as the jury asked to see Matt's deposition video, a transcript of Vanessa's testimony, and for clarification on whether Matt could only be found guilty of drugging and suffocating Kari. As the defense had not decided to put Matt on the stand, the jury would have to rely on witness statements and those made by Vanessa, since the prosecution was not allowed to question him in court. Guy James Gray had lost all confidence in his client and was concerned that he would incriminate himself if he were to testify, since the prosecution had planned for Matt to reenact his actions that night with the use of a dummy that weighed about the same as Kari. Had this been done, he would undoubtedly have struggled to demonstrate dressing the dummy while on the phone, and his case would likely have fallen apart very quickly. But in the end, this made very little difference, as the jury eventually returned and announced that they had found Matt guilty of taking the life of Kari Baker. And even then, Matt claimed that they'd made a mistake, and that he truly believed in his own innocence. The verdict resulted in Matt being sentenced to 65 years behind bars, with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 32 years. This man most likely will never leave prison. In the years that have passed since the crime occurred, Linda and the rest of Kari's family have since forgiven Matt for what he did, since they realized that holding on to a grudge this big could only lead to further misery in their lives. Holding on to this level of resentment, it's like punching yourself and hoping someone else gets hurt. At some point, you just have to stop and admit that what is. They've made peace with the fact that Kari's passing could have been prevented by one person who knew of his plans, and the fact that she would ultimately face no consequences for withholding such valuable information. Linda and Jim have now been given custody of Kinsey and Grace, and they continue to live as a loving family in defiance of the heinous acts committed by a man who many people trusted as an advisor, a spiritual guide, and a mentor. This case is another shining example that just because someone claims to be a Christian, a minister of God's word, or any plethora of things, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a good person or that they're even being truthful. A person's true intentions are almost always seen in their actions, not their words. I've said it before, and I feel that it fits here as well. Matt was not a Christian man. Matt was not a man of God. He was a wolf in a sheep's den, and he was out for blood. To him, I say good riddance, and I hope with every fiber of my being that he's able to turn his life around in prison, but I think we all have to admit this is probably a long shot. Thank you guys for tuning into this true crime compilation, but don't swipe away just yet. For making it this far, I wanted to thank you guys with a bonus case. So without a bunch of extra filler, take a listen to the case of Tair Rada, a young woman who was found murdered and stuffed into a bathroom stall in her own school bathroom. Tair Rada was a teenage Israeli girl who grew up in Katzrin. She loved dancing, and she was very smart. She was adored by her parents and brothers, and she was the apple of everyone's eye. Tair was a kid who loved school. She was defined as diligent, sweet, and charismatic. Her school was not very far away from her home in Katzrin, so even though she was young, she would walk to school. And after coming home, she would always call her mom to let her know that she'd reached home safely. Tair had lots of friends at school, and her life was pretty normal. She had no enemies, and she was literally a teenager, so who would have any animosity towards a teen? Well, apparently someone did, and one day, Tair's whole life would come crashing to a halt when she was found murdered in her own school. It was December 6th of 2006, and Tair's day started like normal. She had to go to school, and in the evening, she had scheduled dance lessons. So Tair spent the day at school, alternating between talking to her friends and studying, but one particular thing happened that had never happened before, and it was that Tair skipped the last period of her school day. Although she'd never done this before, I guess there's a first time for everything. She was still at school, but just not in class. She spent the remainder of that time with her friends in the schoolyard, and not long after she went back to the school building to get something to drink. Tair's friends saw her going into the building, but minutes passed and she never returned. Tair's friends were worried at first, but they thought nothing of it. Perhaps she changed her mind and rejoined the class. Maybe her parents came to pick her up for a family emergency. It could have been anything. So the bell rang, and everyone went home. Back at home, Tair's mom was expecting to see her daughter's backpack on the floor as soon as she walked in. But the house was silent. Tair wasn't at home. Her school clothes weren't in the washing machine. Her bag wasn't there. And it was as if Tair never got home. And that was true. If that wasn't unsettling enough, Tair also didn't make it to her dance lessons. This was very unlike her. She was worried to the bone, so after waiting for a bit, her worry got the best of her, and she called the police. This was a teenager. She couldn't have just gone somewhere and not let her parents know. She knew better than that. So what if she was abducted? So the police doubled down and they searched for her. The last place where Tair was at her school, so the police naturally commenced their search from there. It was a really unusual sight. The school building, which was normally pretty quiet in the evening, was now illuminated by red and blue lights, and police officers were searching one room after the other. They also talked to several students, and they remembered seeing Tair earlier that day going up a staircase that led to the floor where 10th graders had classes. So the police searched that floor, and it led them to the girls' bathroom. They searched stall after stall, and in the end, they came across a stall that was locked. Now, this was very unusual. Who would have locked a vacant bathroom stall? Was it an accident? Well, the police had to figure this out later because they wanted to check what was on the other side of that door. So they called in a worker who had the bathroom keys, and the door was opened in just minutes. When the police saw what was inside, though, they honestly wished they hadn't. It was a gruesome scene. The bathroom floor was indistinguishable from the evidence of the crime because everything was red. The toilet seat was no different either, and on the ground by that toilet was the injured and lifeless body of Tair Rada. She had multiple intense injuries to her neck, torso, and hands. It was a nightmare. Who could have done this to a defenseless teenage girl? Tair was at school, alive and happy just hours ago, and now she was found locked in a bathroom stall, and suddenly the happiness of the Rada family was blown away. Their daughter was murdered. Tair's murder was so horrific and intense. It definitely looked like someone had a lot of anger towards this young woman. The police were honestly left baffled at the brutality of the crime. They'd never seen anything like this before. It's different to see injuries of this extent on a grown person, but to see them on a teenager, and that too at school, it was tugging at everyone's hearts. The monster who attacked Tair was a heartless, cold, and remorseless killer who wasn't above hurting a teen. The police started a homicide investigation right away, and the first thing they had to do was search the crime scene and the surrounding area to find anything left by the killer. The police managed to find a couple of stains that they believed looked like shoe prints on Tair's jeans that she was wearing at the time of her passing. The police initially determined that those shoe prints belonged to a specific brand, Salamander. On top of that, the police also managed to recover a couple of hair strands, and they took all of these things as evidence. The police also claimed to have gathered other mounting evidence from the bathroom stall, even though they never really specified what it was. They later detained a homeless man, as well as a gardener, at the school, both on suspicion, but they were both released later on when nothing fruitful came up. Then, the detectives also talked to students who went in and out of the bathroom at the estimated time when Tair was thought to have been murdered. A bunch of students claimed that they noticed a string of highly suspicious activity. But again, we don't know what this activity was, as police haven't publicly explained this. The details on this case are very choppy and vague, especially considering this took place halfway across the world. The police even talked to Tair's mom and asked her if she thought of anyone as suspicious, and she firmly believed that Tair was murdered by people of, quote, her own world, also known as students at her school. Tair's mom even went as far as saying that Tair's murder could be from a member of a satanic cult. She was convinced that Tair's killing was very grotesque, and it had to be someone who knew her and what she was doing that day. The news of Tair's passing in her own school made headlines in the local news too. It was such a scary thought for parents to send their kids to school. The kids didn't want to go either. They were scared of the school and that very eerie bathroom stall where Tair's life was taken. The police were also doing a lot, but not in a good way. See, whenever a crime happens in a particular place, the law enforcement usually rules that very place and the people in it at the time of the crime out first. Well, the police did nothing of the sort, and they went searching for the killer high and low. From the Golan Heights to Galilee, the detectives talked to multiple people, and they completely skipped the part of talking to the students who were present in the school at the time of Tair's death. This was extremely suspicious, and even the local media called the police out on this huge blunder. But did the police listen? Absolutely not, because they had their set sight on one person already, and perhaps the media judged the police too harshly because the person was within the school premises. He was a maintenance man at the school, and his name was Roman Zdarov. Roman was a Ukrainian national, but what stood out to the police the most was the fact that he was illegally working in the school on a shady work permit. He was present at the school at the time of Tair's murder, and to everyone it looked like an open and shut case. Roman was detained and questioned by the police on December 11th, 5 days after Tair had gone missing and her body was discovered. And 8 days later, on December 19th, the Israeli police held a press conference that they had their man in custody and that Roman had confessed to murdering Tair. The police also claimed that Roman reenacted the murder in front of the investigators too. Everyone was left speechless. Roman did look very suspicious, especially given the fact that he wasn't supposed to be working at the school to begin with. How did things escalate to this point? Well, even though things looked pretty straightforward from the outside looking in, nothing was as it seemed. See, Roman had a very weak grasp on the native language, Hebrew, and he claimed that he tried to be as cooperative with the police as he could to help solve the young girl's murder. It was after the questioning, which he understood very little of, by the way, that the police threw the bombshell of the century, that he was being arrested on suspicion of murdering Tair. Roman was honestly left speechless. First, he didn't really understand the language. He was talking to literal strangers, and he was confined in an interrogation room for God knows how long, and now he was being charged with a murder he said he didn't commit. But the police quickly came to their own defense. According to the evidence found by the police, the shoe prints of salamander shoes found on Tair's jeans were the same as Roman's shoes. The police also claimed that the hair found at the crime scene matched Roman's. On top of that, the police had a motive too. Roman murdered Tair out of anger when she approached him and asked if he had any cigarettes. When Roman refused, that was when Tair apparently went off her rocker and insulted Roman to no end. This was eventually what led Roman to lose his cool and drag Tair into the girl's bathroom and finish her off. But here's the thing. Tair's mom later came forward and said that this motive didn't make sense at all. Tair didn't smoke, and she couldn't stand the smell of cigarettes either. So what's going on here? I honestly don't know how the police managed to come up with such a dramatic motive, but apparently the police dug into Roman's childhood, and they found out that Roman was very angry and unstable, and it stemmed from when he was taken advantage of by a female student when he was only 8 years old. According to the police, Roman also hated working at the school because students always picked on him for being a maintenance man, and he was hanging on to his patience by a very thin thread, which apparently broke when Tair insulted him on that fateful day. Even though the police said that Roman had confessed to the crime, his lawyer came forward a day later and informed everyone that Roman had taken back his confession. But even though Roman's attorney said that he recanted this confession, Roman was eventually charged with the murder of Tair, and now he was awaiting trial. Roman's trial was held in January of 2007, and it started with the state presenting all of the mounting evidence, a 456-page conviction to be exact. But there were a couple of problems. See, there was no signed confession from Roman, so the only thing the state had to go off of was the reenactment of the murder. Also, it was revealed the Israeli police leaked the DNA results to the press. And also, it was argued that the prosecution filed for an indictment based on mere circumstantial evidence without waiting for the actual DNA results from US labs. Even more, it was later found that the hair found at the crime scene didn't match Roman's DNA either. Also, remember that footprint found on Tair's jeans? The police were certain that the prints belonged to Roman's salamander shoes, but a British shoe imprint expert, Dr. Guy Cooper, testified in 2009 that the stains on Tair's jeans could not be considered shoe prints, let alone Roman's. But this expert's testimony, it was dismissed by the court, so there's that. But not just him, but an FBI shoe imprint expert named William Bodziak said the same thing, but his testimony was also kicked to the side by the court. But speaking of shoes, a student from Tair's school also testified in court that she was in the bathroom on the day of Tair's murder, and she even went to the stall where Tair was found, locked in there. When the door wouldn't open, she peeked under the stall and she saw Tair's Puma shoes, as well as another pair of shoes, which she thought to be a youth-sized all-star shoe, and a questionable sight of red. There were no salamander shoes in sight. So what was going on? Why were the police adamant to pin Tair's murder on Roman? Even Tair's mom, who didn't even know Roman personally, was suspicious of the police's behavior. She was never included in the investigation, and all she got was a call from the station that the murderer had been caught. But she never thought that Roman was the murderer. She still believes that whoever murdered her daughter was a fellow student or someone else from the school. But in the end, Roman was found guilty of Tair's murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison in September of 2010. His attorneys fought very hard to appeal the conviction and overturn it, and after a bunch of denials from the court and almost 10 years later, the Supreme Court finally ordered a retrial. And finally, in March of 2023, Roman was acquitted of the charges, and he was released from prison. His attorneys tried their best to prove Roman's innocence, how he was coerced into giving a confession when the police knew good and well he didn't even understand what they were saying. He didn't speak Hebrew. And now he was also fooled by the police informant in prison, pretending to be a friend of his, in hopes of getting more information out of Roman and solidifying the state's case against him. Roman was not the one who murdered Tair. He was caught in a string of misfortunes that were led by an incompetent police force who just wanted a scapegoat to close a murder case quickly. Roman was relieved when he was acquitted of the charge, but he ended up spending 10 years or so in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. This case completely took the attention away from the real victim and her loved ones, and it turned into a tale of politics and incompetence and failure to carry out justice. Roman is now a free man, but Tair's case still stands where it was almost 2 decades ago, unsolved. The only person who could have any answers as to who attacked Tair was herself. She suffered a great deal before taking her last breath, and her parents were absolutely shattered that they still can't get justice for her. But what happened to Tair that day, and who did this to her? Sadly, we might never find out. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you're new here and you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It's completely free and it just lets you know when I post new videos. And if you love the channel and want to help support us, consider hitting that join button below the video and become a member of the channel. It allows you to see new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're posted to the public, and it's a great way to help the channel out financially. And I appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. And speaking of which, I wanted to give a shout out to some new channel members this week, including CC Ice, Miranda Tanner, Rinda Jane, Promo Gift SA, Amanda Sidick, and Tamika Baz. And don't forget, you can grab a True Crime Stories t-shirt by clicking the link below the video, including our most recent It's Never a Mannequin tee. But with that, my name is Ty Knotts. I thank you guys again for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.